for business people.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Primetime. My name is Ayush Alavadi. Let's start off with the headlines first. Revenue Secretary Hasmukh Adhia says the government is analysing reasons for shortfall in filing GST returns and will take corrective action soon. The Prime Minister's Advisory Council identifies 10 priority areas to revive growth, says the government should stick to the fiscal deficit target. It's a big boost for Sun Pharma. The US FDA gave an all-clear for the company's Dadra plant, its second largest facility which caters to the US market. IEX IPO faces a foreign investor outrage. Regulatory confusion prompts first ever cancellation of anchor investors. Piramal Enterprises looks to raise 5,000 crores through a mix of convertible debentures and a rights issue. That's a Bloomberg Quint exclusive. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court says that sexual intercourse with a wife below 18 years of age will be considered as rape. Now, the government is analysing the reasons behind the shortfall in filing of GST R1 returns, but will take corrective action, if any, only after conducting a survey. That's the word coming in from Hasmukh Adhia. Speaking to Bloomberg Quint's Nikunj Ori, the Revenue Secretary added that a clear trend on revenue collections will emerge after at least 6 months. Listen in.
Taking immediate action against them is not desirable. We need to understand the reasons for non-filing. We are trying to do that. We will actually get into the reasons for non-filing. Now we will analyze this data because for the month of July, so far something like 54 lakh returns have been filed, 3B. And GSTR1 have been about 45.99, so about 46 lakhs GSTR1 till yesterday. Now there is a gap of 8 lakhs there. So we'll try to see what is the reason for this gap of 8 lakhs. And then also there could be, the reason could be that some people do not have any transactions to report. Some people may be simply B2C and they may not worry about invoice matching, etc. So we'll have to see what are the reasons, and it could also be a misunderstanding among people that not everybody is supposed to file GSTR1. So if that is the case, after doing the survey, we will try to take corrective action. If it is information gap, then we will try to remove the information gap.
Although the number of days on which tax was collected for the month of August was only 25, if you compare it with July, on which 29 days tax was collected. So what is the reason according to you for this shortfall, and what could the government do in order to bridge this shortfall and allow all more taxpayers to file returns?
These are initial months of GST, and it was expected that in the initial months, more revenue will come in IGST, because for every interstate transfer of goods, including by the same company to its own depot, IGST was required. So it was expected that there will be a greater flow of IGST in the beginning, but as you know, IGST is only a washout tax. After 2-3 months, the flow of IGST will decline, and the total amount received by government in cash will also decline. First 2 months is no indication, because we had expected it will be this thing. So we'll have to actually watch the revenue trend of SGST and CGST. That is the most important trend, and that we will have to keep watching for the next 6 months.
Maharashtra Finance Minister recently said that many states have agreed to bring petrol and diesel under GST. So would we see petrol and diesel coming under the ambit of GST anytime soon, sir?
Well, I don't know what individually some ministers have expressed their opinion, but collectively in the council, this subject has not been discussed so far. And unless all states agree to this proposal, it's difficult to bring it in. So we'll see what will be the best time to discuss this in the council and take a decision.
Well, of course, that's just a snippet of the conversation. You can catch the full conversation with the Revenue Secretary Hasmukh Adhia at 8:30 p.m. tonight, just before the prime time debate. Now, the New Look Economic Advisory Council met for the first time today. The panel chaired by Niti Ayog's Bibek Debroy has identified 10 priority areas to revive growth in the country. The economic advisors also warned against any relaxation in the budget deficit goal, even as pressure builds on the government to boost spending. Listen in.
There is a consensus amongst us about the various reasons that have contributed to the slowdown in the growth rate. 10 issues that we have identified are: 1, economic growth; 2, employment and job creation; 3, the informal sector and the integration of the informal sector; 4, the fiscal framework; 5, monetary policy; 6, public expenditure and efficiency of public expenditure; 7, institutions of economic governance; 8, agriculture and animal husbandry; 9, patterns of consumption and production; and 10, the social sector.
Meanwhile, direct tax collections in the 6 months from April to September have witnessed a robust growth of close to 16%. The centre has mopped up 3.86 lakh crore rupees, mainly led by a healthy growth in advance taxes. The net direct tax collections constitute nearly 40% of the total budget estimate of direct taxes at 9.8 lakh crore rupees for the current fiscal. Refunds amounting to 79,660 crore rupees have been issued during the same period. Moving on, the Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand governments have decided to reduce VAT on petrol and diesel. This comes a day after VAT on fuel prices was cut in Gujarat and, of course, in Maharashtra as well. Uttarakhand will slash the VAT and cess by 2% each, while Himachal Pradesh will cut VAT on fuel by 1%. Now, for more on that story and all the other stories, you can always log on to www.bloombergquint.com. India's largest pharma company, Sun Pharma, has received the Establishment Inspection Report for their Dadra plant. Now, the report that the US FDA has cleared, the facility has been cleared with no observations, and the facility is fully compliant to resume supplies to the US markets. Darshan Mehta of Bloomberg Quint joins us to decode what it means for the company. Darshan, if you could start off by telling us exactly that. What does this mean for Sun Pharma, especially considering, it's such a large facility that's actually, providing for the US market?
Well, Ayush, it simply means that Diwali is coming early for Sun Pharma this time around. It's been pending. In April, they got a Form 483 with 11 observations, which mean that the US FDA found issues as far as their Dadra plant is concerned. Now, they were all procedural in nature. There was no data integrity. But still, because of this, newer approvals were not coming in from the Dadra facility. Now, since this establishment inspection report has come in, this means that the US FDA has said that all the issues are closed. You can again start. So now the approvals will again start coming in for Sun Pharma. How much does this contribute? It's almost $150 million close to. They don't give an exact figure, but this is what the analysts anticipate. So 6 to 7% of the US sales. And this now means, so financially it doesn't make that much of an impact, but this is a huge booster because in terms of sentiment, because now people will believe that the Sun Pharma is trying to get its act right, and Halol, which is their biggest facility, which has been under warning letter. It was inspected again, then there was a 483 with another 9 observation. That is the big problem. So once that is cleared, that will be the re-rating trigger. There are some other facilities of Sun Pharma which are under the scanner, but this facility, which is the second largest facility for Sun Pharma for the US business, if that has gotten cleared, sentimentally, yes, it's a big boost for Sun Pharma. Financially, not that much, I can say, but sentimentally, this will be a big booster for Sun Pharma because now the street will believe that Sun is getting its act right, and now all focus will shift to Halol.
All right, Darshan, thanks for that update. Just taking that last point that you made to our guest, Surjit Pal, research analyst at Prabhudas Lilladhar, joins us now. Mr. Pal, I'd like to start by asking you, when it comes to this particular announcement, what does this mean? Would you actually be upgrading estimates because of this move?
I think financially, the company will not be benefited immediately because Sun Pharma has not stopped export from that plant, nor USFDA has asked them to stop. The only positive outcome from this EIR it could be that company will start getting new approvals. So now we have to see how many of those approvals are already being genericized and how many of them remain meaningful for the company. But I'm sure that few of them will definitely be still meaningful for the company. But given the company's in terms of top line or bottom line, but yes, it is positive. Sentimentally, it is positive. Financially, how much it would help that we have to see. But as of now, there is nothing great boost in terms of top line or bottom.
All right, Mr. Pal, thank you so much for that update. Well, also, regulatory compliance hurdles still remain for Sun Pharma, considering, well, the Halol plant is still to get some sort of clearance from the regulator. But we'll keep you up to date with that on Bloomberg Quint. Stay tuned for that. Moving on to the next story. Piramal Enterprises is looking to raise 5,000 crore rupees from foreign investors. At least 3 bankers have told Bloomberg Quint that some foreign fund houses have already shown interest, and the board will be meeting tomorrow to take a final call. So how does the group plan to raise this capital? Yatin Mota, Bloomberg Quint, who broke that story for us, has this report.
Ajay, Piramal-controlled Piramal Enterprises is all set to raise close to $750 million or 5,000 crores via a mix of compulsory convertible debenture issue as well as a rights issue. Now, what we gather from investment bankers close to the transaction is that close to $500 million of the $750 million will be in the form of convertible debentures. And, initial response for the convertible debenture is quite strong. In fact, we have a strong demand coming in, or rather a commitment of $500 million coming in from various pension funds and FIIs. For the remainder $250 million, we will have a rights issue, which could be planned by Piramal Enterprises. Of course, the pricing of the rights issue is likely to be at a discount to the current market price. Now, if you look at the entire 5,000 crore fundraising exercise, this will be probably to augment the growing financial services business, especially the housing finance business. And if you look at the investment bankers for the transaction, Kotak Investment Bank, Citigroup and Morgan Stanley are said to be the bankers to the entire transaction. Of course, when we contacted Piramal Enterprises, we did not get a response yet, but tomorrow we'll have the board meeting wherein the plans for the fundraising will be finalized.
On the last day of its IPO, the Indian Energy Exchange had to cancel allotment of shares to foreign anchor investors. This is probably the first time an IPO has witnessed a change in its anchor books hours away from closing the issue. The reason for this was regulatory confusion. Sajit Mankat of Bloomberg Quint joins us to explain what exactly went wrong. Sajit, it was an interesting last day for the IEX IPO. Could you actually break down what happened today?
That's right. It was an interesting day, actually the closing day for Indian Energy Exchange IPO. On the last day of the IPO, the bankers and the company had to halve the entire anchor book. Nearly half of the anchor book had gone to the foreign portfolio investors who had put in the bids, and they were allotted short shares on Friday when the anchor book closed. And over a period of from Monday onwards, there has been some regulatory confusion which was going on in the entire IPO, and that led to finally the bankers and company deciding that they will exclude or they will not allow foreign portfolio investors to be part of the issuance, and that these investors will be allowed to enter the company once the company lists on the stock exchange, and that will happen in the next 10 days. So it's a good it was a confusing or important day for that IPO in that sense.
Right, Sajid, and also you mentioned regulatory confusion. Could you explain to us to some extent what that regulatory confusion was that actually stopped foreign investors from investing in this particular IPO? Well,
there was 2 instances here. One was the FDI regulation. The regulation very categorically states that in case of power exchanges which are under the ambit of CERC, which is Central Electric Regulatory Commission, foreign direct investment or FPIs can only invest in the secondary market. They cannot. That means they cannot participate in an IPO. They can invest once the IPO the company lists on the market. They can trade and they can take positions in the company. The argument of the bankers was that since this IPO is an offer for sale by existing shareholders, it is a secondary transaction, and hence foreign institutional investors can invest and be part of the IPO as a whole. But when the custodians raised this issue with the SEBI, which is a market regulator, the regulator had a different viewpoint on this. The regulator stated that in a secondary market, it is very, as per the foreign portfolio investors guidelines regulation, which is of 2014, foreign portfolio investors can participate in secondary market only through recognized stockbrokers. Now, in the case of an IPO, there is no stockbroker which is part of the IPO process, only merchant bankers who are part of the process, and so foreign portfolio investors cannot participate in such an IPO where secondary market transaction is happening unless it is done through a stock broker. So that created a big confusion, because it will have a ramification for future IPOs as well, where it is completely led by offer for sale by existing shareholders. So that's something SEBI will have to work on and come out with a clarification. But till then, the bankers and the company decided to exclude FPIs. By the way, the IPO closed today, and it was oversubscribed by 2.2 times.
All right, Sujit, thank you for that update. But there's more to that story. In fact, Bloomberg Quint spoke to SN Goyal, the CEO of IEX, who actually said that it was indeed regulatory issues that forced the company to cut its Anchor IPO allotment. Listen in.
See, post receipt of the bids from anchor investors, certain custodians had communicated to the BRLMs that FPI shall not be eligible to participate in the offer. It is probably because of the view taken by the legal team regarding some regulatory provisions. And the company, along with the BRLM, we discussed this issue with the regulator, but then the time was very short, and it was not possible to give some clarification to them. And accordingly, to unnecessarily complicate the issue, we decided that let FPI not participate in the issue, let this be a purely domestic issue.
Well, for more on that story, of course, you can log on to www.bloombergquint.com and we'd give you all the details on that story. Well, moving on, both the benchmark indices snapped their 3-day winning streak as banking shares dragged the market down. Banking shares came under selling pressure in the afternoon deals, and the Nifty closed the day below the 10,000 mark. Pradeep Pandya of Bloomberg Quint breaks down the day for the markets in this report.
We had a smart opening today. The Nifty followed the cue from other Asian markets, and global markets were looking fine. Commodity cues were also positive, but today in trade, in the afternoon, especially in this last hour and a half of trade, markets corrected. Not only Sensex and Nifty, but also mid-cap and small-cap. We saw all-around selling, and what was a bit alarming is India VIX, the volatility index that gained, which kind of shows the fear emerging in market. So basically, traders were shifting to hedge, and they were buying put in a big way, and that is why the VIX moved up. If you look at overall market indices, the mid-cap and small-cap over last two trading sessions, when Nifty was trying to inch up, when Nifty was holding above 10,000 yesterday and also in first half today, mid-cap and small-cap were actually outperforming the market, and these segments were actually the worst hit when market corrected. Banking and metal were among the key losers, and also some of the high beta stocks like real estate that corrected in a big way in today's trade. If you look at some of the heavyweights which really put pressure, and the ones that tried to minimize the losses, Indian Oil and HPCL, even BPCL, all the oil marketing companies, oil or energy was one segment that managed to hold strong even in a weak market that we had today. Also Bharti Infratel and Bharti Airtel, both these stocks were strong on the back of a news report that probably a big PE firm is looking to invest in Bharti Infratel, but Airtel actually benefited more than the subsidiary. If we look at losers, banking sector saw across the board selling pressure. Interestingly, you could see the PSUs as well as private sector banks that were down. If you look at some other stocks, Vedanta, Tata Motors were some of the heavyweights that lost in today's trade. Even in mid caps, if you look at, interestingly, Sun TV, JM Financial, these are some of the names. If you look at the performance over last week or so, these are some of the high beta traders' favorite stocks that were moving up, and these are the ones that corrected in a big way. Also HEG and Graphite, these twin stocks that have moved up significantly over last 1 month or so. So this was a typical profit booking session, so to say. Stocks that had gained over last week or 10 days were actually the ones that were correcting with good volume.
Now, in the big national story from today, in a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today criminalized sexual intercourse with a minor wife who's between 15 and 18 years of age. The apex court ruled that the exception in the rape law was arbitrary and a violation of the Constitution. The clause in question is found in Section 375 of the Indian Penal Code, which defines the offence of rape. It says intercourse or sexual act by a man with his wife not below 15 years is not a rape. That's an exception in an exception, the second one. However, the age of consent is 18 years.
In the case of a person under 18, minor, from the very nature of things, she's not able to give a free consent. She's overawed. So actually the Supreme Court must have thought in such case, the age is important. Minor, in that age, in that condition, is not able to give consent. So in the absence of consent, free will, it amounts to rape. In India, for this, I don't think there's anything really wrong with the Supreme Court judgments.
Well, we also have with us KTS Tulsi, senior advocate at the Supreme Court, who joins us on the phone line. Mr. Tulsi, thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg Quint. Now, I'd like to start by asking you, now this is obviously a landmark ruling by the Supreme Court, but I wanted to get your view on this, considering that the age of consent when it comes, to Indian laws has been 18 in many other legislations, be it POSCO or be it, Juvenile Justice Act. Do you think it was high time that it was actually raised with this exception as well?
Well, it may be raised, may not be raised. We should, of course, do everything to curb the practice of child marriages, underage marriages. But when the law itself says that it will be rape only if she is under the age of 15, how do we make this now penal? The courts don't legislate. And if at all the law is struck down, it's struck down. But it won't make it penal. It has been struck down, but I think it's too harsh on the man or the boy. Because, you see, if there is a practice, then both should be liable. To make the man or the boy alone liable and say that it's rape is too harsh a consequence. And rightly, perhaps the Parliament had not made it penal. It had not made it the offence of rape. If by implication we make it, I think it will again be open to challenge.
Right, Mr. Tulsi, but also when it comes to, the issue of child marriage in the country, considering that this exception existed all this while in the Indian Penal Code from the last amendment, do you really think that, what's the next logical step? Is it to take on, the evil of child marriage?
No, I think that the exception was good. And the exception, if it is to be struck down, it certainly won't make it an offence. If it is struck down, the defense goes. But the question is it fair to hold the man responsible who believes that he is married? And the woman also indulges in sexual activity thinking that she is married. Now, of course, either you prevent marriages. If you can't prevent marriages, you can't punish one of the parties alone.
Right, Mr. Tulsi, that's your take on it. But just since you actually did talk to us about it, I just want to understand, if you're in favor of that exception having existed, do you think that, is that because of the social fabric of the country that, child marriage is a reality, it's a truth? Is that, what is your rationale for something like that still existing?
No, the legislature realizes that you can't effectively prevent, if you can't prevent marriages among the minors, then that's why the exception was provided, that it will become too harsh otherwise. If at all this practice is adopted in remote areas and they actually live together, all of a sudden there are some differences and then this becomes rape. How can this become rape retrospectively? when it is realized that I only really think that either the girl's parents should be made liable. If we want to seriously curb the practice of child marriage, let the parents of the girl become liable for having given their daughter in marriage at that time. If it's going to have such serious repercussions on the man, surely it must be balanced by making, if not the girl because she is a minor, the parents should be liable. They are the ones who gave their daughter in marriage.
Right, Mr. Tulsi, thanks so much. I think that's a very interesting take. But what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the implications of the ruling in detail on our primetime debate segment that's coming up just after this show. And we're going to have, well, the petitioner also joining in, and of course, senior lawyers as well. But that's, well, a point well taken by Mr. Tulsi. Now, moving on to other news, an inquiry report by Western Railway has put down the September 29th Elphinstone Bridge stampede to heavy rains, citing video footage of the incident and statements from 30 commuters injured in the accident. A Western Railway panel, which authored the report, has said that heavy rains forced people to rush to the already jammed staircase for cover, which caused the stampede in the first place. The panel also drew up recommendations like relocating the booking office to widen the staircase leading to the platform, preventing passengers from carrying heavy luggage during peak hours, and building an additional staircase. Now, 23 people had lost their lives to the stampede on September 29th. Now, the RBI is doing its bit to make electronic payments seamless. The Reserve Bank of India today said that banks and non-banking financial companies, or NBFCs, should make their wallets interoperable through the Unified Payments Interface, or UPI, within 6 months. Now, that's an interesting development. And to actually understand what that means, Vishwanath Nair of Bloomberg Quint joins us with the details. Vishy, does this mean that I can actually transfer money from my Paytm wallet to your MobiKwik wallet if I need to or if I want to?
Yes, as long as you are KYC compliant, Ayush. That seems to be the hiccup here, because unless these accounts are KYC compliant, the RBI will not allow this kind of interoperability for now. Plus, of course, in the master directions, it says that the RBI has said that whenever you issue a new mobile wallet to a customer, within 12 months you have to convert it into a KYC compliant account. If you miss this 12-month deadline, then the account will not be allowed to top up a further amount into the wallet. The customer will, however, be allowed to use the money that is already existing within the wallet. Apart from that, of course, within this interoperability sort of structure that the RBI is trying to create, the regulator is trying to provide interoperability between bank accounts as well as mobile wallets. Before this, there was an issue whether you could only transfer money from a bank account to a wallet, which was the semi-closed sort of infrastructure. But now the RBI is working on a system where you can transfer both ways. Apart from this, in PPIs, or prepaid instruments, such as in the form of cards, such as in meal passes or in gift cards, there again the RBI is trying to bring in some form of interoperability. Now, these are all very rudimentary sort of statements that the RBI has made in the master directions. Operational guidelines in this regard will be released later. That is what the regulator has said. So we'll have to wait on how these phases are going to be planned out, and what are the kind of timelines that are going to be given to banks as well as the non-banks in the system.
All right, Rishi, thanks so much for that update. Well, that's about all the time we have on this news show, but there's more to come. Well, there's also the big interview of the day. Revenue Secretary Hasmukh Adhia talks to Bloomberg Quint exclusively about the challenges faced by the government in the implementation of the Goods and Services Tax. And then, of course, there's the prime time debate. So for all that and a lot more, stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint.